So you're planning a trip to East Africa, maybe a safari in Kenya or chimpanzees in Uganda or a beach holiday on the Indian Ocean. It's amazing. But before you start packing, there's one thing you don't want to forget: your health. Hi, my name's John. I'm a Canadian family doctor who's traveled extensively in East Africa over the last 20 years. And I've never had any significant health problems while I've been there. Today, I want to tell you about some of the important vaccinations that you have to get to prepare for traveling to East Africa, some of which you may not be that familiar with. I'll also give you a few practical health tips to keep you safe while you're exploring. Traveler's diarrhea is certainly the most common problem that any traveler has and anywhere in the world. And because it's so universal, I've made a separate video about that, and I'll link to that video at the end of this one. First of all, make sure that all your routine vaccinations are up to date. Every adult should be having a tetanus booster every 10 years. Sometimes this is just a tetanus and diphtheria booster, and sometimes it's tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis, which is whooping cough. Tetanus bacteria are found in soils all over the world, and they can enter your body through cuts and wounds. And acacia thorns in East Africa are common, so sometimes you'll get a puncture wound in your foot. Adults should be boosted every 10 years. If it's been a while since you've had this, ask for the TDAP vaccine, because that will cover you for pertussis as well. Other routine vaccinations that seniors should have would include pneumococcal vaccine for prevention of pneumonias and Shingrix to head off shingles. Once you've had those vaccines, they're good for a lifetime. And then there's hepatitis. All travelers should make sure that they have vaccination for hepatitis. And there are two kinds: hepatitis A, which spreads through contaminated food and water. It's quite common in East Africa. If you take one dose, it provides short-term protection, but a booster after 6 to 12 months gives lifelong immunity. Hepatitis B spreads through blood and body fluids, and it's most relevant if you're getting medical care, tattoos, or engaging in high-risk activities. Hepatitis B vaccination should be considered if you might be at risk, whether you're at home or traveling. It's 3 doses over 6 months, and that gives lifelong immunity. Now, if you've had neither of these, you can get a combined preparation that will protect you against both hepatitis A and hepatitis B. And then there's yellow fever vaccination, which is required in some cases and for travel to some countries. If you're traveling from one East African country to another, you will probably be asked to provide evidence of yellow fever vaccination. This is required as well if you travel from anywhere into Uganda or Tanzania. If you're traveling from North America or Europe into Kenya alone, you don't need the yellow fever vaccination proof. But if you plan to travel from Kenya, then into Uganda, you'll need to show proof of vaccination. A single dose provides lifetime protection. No boosters are needed unless a specific country requires something like that. If you arrive at a border that requires yellow fever vaccine and you haven't had it, you may be offered it at the border. But I would prefer to get mine at home. You need to have it about 10 days before travel, and most of the time it has to be done at a travel clinic or somewhere where they actually stock the vaccine. Typhoid fever is a bacterial infection caused by Salmonella typhi, primarily spread through contaminated food and water. Symptoms usually develop 1 to 3 weeks after exposure, and they can range from mild to severe. Early symptoms, the first week after exposure, usually include gradual onset of fever, often rising over several days, and it can reach temperatures of 39 to 40 degrees centigrade, or 101 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. You may have headache, general weakness and fatigue, loss of appetite, mild abdominal discomfort, and constipation or diarrhea. Constipation tends to be more common in adults and diarrhea in children. If left untreated, typhoid fever can become more widespread throughout the body and make you seriously ill. If it's diagnosed, it's treated with antibiotics. But for prevention, there are 2 vaccine options which are recommended if you're traveling to East Africa. The first is an injection. A single shot that's good for 2 years. The second is an oral vaccine. These are 4 oral treatments that are taken over the course of a week, and they only need to be boosted every 5 years. Which is better? Well, the oral version offers longer protection, but the injection is quicker to take. You may also see recommendation for vaccination for meningococcal meningitis. East Africa is part of the meningitis belt, and outbreaks can happen, especially in crowded places. You could get that vaccine prior to travel, and one shot would cover you for about 5 years. Some people ask about cholera. Do you need it? Well, probably not, unless you're traveling to areas with active outbreaks or staying in places with very poor sanitation. There is an oral cholera vaccine called Dukoral that provides short-term protection for cholera. But good food and water hygiene are more effective for most travelers. Dukoral is also sometimes recommended for prevention of traveler's diarrhea because it has an added benefit of protecting from the enterotoxins that are caused by E. coli, a common bacteria that causes traveler's diarrhea. Now, what about malaria prevention? Malaria is a big concern in East Africa, but it's completely preventable if you take the right steps. First of all, your doctor will prescribe one of these medications for you. The easiest daily pill with few side effects is called Malaria. You start to take it a couple of days before you're entering a zone where there might be malaria, and you continue it for about 6 days after you've returned. It's very effective, and it has minimal side effects, except it is a little expensive. Doxycycline is the second choice. This is cheaper, but you have to take it prior to traveling and carry on for a longer period once you've returned home. It can have some stomach upset and occasionally will give you some photosensitivity. And since there's a lot of sun in East Africa, that might be a deterrent. The third one is mefloquine. Mefloquine's taken once a week, but it has the disadvantage that it sometimes can cause hallucinations and nightmares. And if you're traveling somewhere strange, that's really not something that you want to encounter. The best thing is to try and avoid mosquito bites. Use an insect repellent. Wear long sleeves, particularly in the evening and early morning, and sleep under a bed net if you're staying in rural areas. Start your medication before you enter a malarial zone and continue for the recommended time after leaving. Nairobi, because of its higher altitude, tends not to be a problem for malaria, but outlying areas in the savannah and by the coast certainly are. The other thing is that the mosquitoes there tend to be much smaller than the ones we have in North America, so you may not notice them quite so much. But you may also hear one buzzing around your head in bed if you're not using a bed net. And that can be pretty annoying. One risk that many travelers don't think about is bilharzia, also known as schistosomiasis. It's a parasitic infection that you can get from freshwater lakes and rivers, especially Lake Victoria and parts of the Nile. How to avoid it? Well, don't swim, wade, or bathe in freshwater lakes or rivers. Pools that are chlorinated are fine, and salt water in the Indian Ocean is perfectly safe. If you're accidentally exposed, dry off and wash yourself with clean water. And if you've had any significant exposure, you should probably get tested 6 to 8 weeks after you return home, because the parasite takes a little bit of time before it shows up. Before we wrap up, here are a few extra tips to stay healthy while traveling in East Africa. You can watch my other video about traveler's diarrhea, but the best thing for that is prevention. In a nutshell, stay hydrated, but drink safe water. Stick to bottled, filtered, or boiled water. Wear sunscreen and a hat. The African sun is intense, even on cloudy days. You're near the equator. And you may want to pack a basic medical kit, including Band-Aids, a few pain relievers, some rehydration salts, some loperamide and Gravol, and any prescription medications that you take regularly. The other thing would be to check on your travel insurance and see what you're covered for, because if you get sick or if you have an injury, You want to be sure that you're covered for any medical costs that you might incur. I know this may sound like a lot, but with just a little preparation, you can avoid health problems and focus on enjoying your trip. Africa is an incredible destination, and with these tips, you'll be ready to experience it safely. If you found this video helpful, hit that like button and subscribe for more senior solo travel tips. Safe travels, and see you next time.